Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I pray that you're all well and your prayers are accepted. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought us to verse 178 of Surah al-Baqarah. And this is a very important verse regarding murder, what happens when someone is killed and dies. It's also an essential verse in qisas, retribution. When someone is killed, what are the consequences in Islam for that? And as we'll see, this is very much relevant in terms of the global crisis that we are in with our brothers and sisters in Gaza as well as around the world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts this verse and says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum al-qisas. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts this verse saying, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. And this is, as you know, is a common phrase in the Quran. And is speaking generally to the believers, the mu'min, and the people that have faith in their hearts. So there are other verses in the Quran that talk about Ya ayyuhan nas, speaking to all of humanity. But here, this is a hukum primarily to the believers and to the early Medinan community regarding killing between the different tribes. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, kutiba alaykum. And kutiba, as we know, kataba literally means to write. But in the Quran, we see this used to decree. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is decreeing something. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam. We decreed upon you fasting. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have decreed upon you qisas. So what is qisas? First, the linguistic meaning of this is literally to follow. So we see this in the Quran that when the al-Musa, when the mother of Musa, when she's talking to her daughter and she puts Musa into a box and puts him in the Nile. So what does she say to her daughter? قَالَتْ لِأُخْتِهِ قُصِّيهِ. So she says to her daughter, follow your brother. Follow your brother because we don't know where he's going to end up. So here, this idea of also qissa, story, comes from this, the idea of following the athar, the footsteps, the traces. So here, what does qisas mean? You have to follow up the murder, the killing. If someone dies or is killed, you cannot let that go. Because people, they remember that. If people see blood shed on this earth, and they see nothing is done, no one acts upon it, and people are silent, then there will be, as we'll see later, more murder. And there will be more bloodshed. So part of our deen is qisas. That if someone is killed and is murdered, then there's consequences. Because if you do not be strong as a community, as a nation, as a society, then more people will die. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِصَاصِ فِي الْقَتْلَى. So when people are killed, then you have to do this retribution. So what is this retribution all about? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الْحُرُّ بِالْحُرِّ وَالْعَبْدُ بِالْعَبْدِ وَالْأُنْثَى بِالْأُنْثَى. SubhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for the free person, there's qisas. For the abd, there's qisas. And then for the woman, there's qisas. Allahu Akbar. And here, I read different mufassirin, and they make a very powerful point that when Islam came to Arabia, they had this idea of qisas, a retribution, but only for the man. That if the man was killed, then you have to kill another man, or you have to give some maybe diya. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, even for the abd. If a slave was killed, then you also have to give diya. If a woman was killed, then you have to also give diya, and you have to do qisas. Subhanallah. And this shows here, even the medieval exegetes, classical times, say this is the importance of musawa, of equality in Islam. That we just don't privilege one group of people over other, or one tribe over another, or one gender, or one free status. One people are occupied and one people are quote-unquote free. Then they're still the same. You can't discriminate against one people over another. And then the verse continues and says, فَمَنْ عُفِيَ لَهُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ شَيْءٌ فَاتَّبَعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. SubhanAllah. But then you have the idea of pardon, afa. And if the brother or someone in the family decides to pardon, then that's permissible. And if someone in the family decides, look, we don't want blood to shed of this other person, then that's permissible, that they're allowed to pardon them. And then you should follow this bil ma'ruf. And the scholars say, what is this bil ma'ruf? And the idea of determining the blood money. How much money should we give this person who was killed? So how much should we compensate that family or that tribe? وَأَدَاءٌ إِلَيْهِ بِالْإِحْسَانِ. And then when you give that with goodness, you don't throw it at the person and say that person's life was worthless. No, you say that it was important. That was a human. And part of the mufassirin, some mufassirin say this verse is complemented or even abrogated by another verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, an-nafs bil-nafs. So any soul from any tribe or any nation has to be compensated equally, with equality. ذَلِكَ تَخْفِيفٌ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ. Allahu Akbar. That this is something that is making it light, making it easier for the community, and it's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the scholars, they explain this. What does this mean? They say that during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, for the Yahud at the time, they only had qatl. When someone was killed in war or in normal civilian life, then the only punishment is that we have to kill that person. And during the time, many Christian tribes, if someone was killed, they would just encourage, just pardon them. Don't worry, just forgive them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced for the Muslim community another category of diya, of blood money, that you're also able to give money. Because someone, if you have these two options, just forgiving or killing. Some people, they don't want to forgive, they want their justice. So, but they don't want to kill the other person, they don't want to create more bloodshed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this category as a release to something that's easy and as a rahmah for the believers. فَمَنْ اعْتَدَى بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَلَهُ عَذَابٌ عَلِيمٌ. But if you transgress after these three categories, then there is a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is an essential concept because during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, one person would die from a tribe, and then the other tribe would come, and they would kill 100 of that tribe. So you kill one of us, then we're going to kill 10 times that much, 100 times that much. Because our tribe, our blood is important, your blood doesn't matter. There's no equality. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came and said, no. You cannot do that. If someone killed someone, you don't go and kill their family. You don't kill their spouse or their children. You don't take them hostage or torture them. There has to be equality and justice on the person who actually created or did the murder. And you see that there's several hadith and statements here from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when someone is killed, what is the consequences? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, فَإِنَّهُ يَخْتَارْ إِحْدَى ثَلَاثٍ. That someone, if a murder happens in their family, someone is killed, they have three choices. They said, وَأَمَّا أَن تَعْفُوا, that you forgive the person. Maybe it was a mistake, there was something wrong, that you shouldn't necessarily pursue that. وَأَمَّا أَن يَأْخُذَ دِيَةً, or you take the blood money. Someone said, look, our family, on behalf of our family, we're sorry, we're going to give some money to your family. وَإِمَّا أَن يَقْتَص, that you go and then the person is killed for their crime in an equal way. And that after this, there's nothing left. وَمَنْ اِعْتَدَى بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَلَهُ نَارٌ جَهَنَّمْ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. And whoever goes after this, these are your three choices. After this, you go and kill other people and you kill more people of that nation or that tribe, or you take the money and then you still kill them. This is sending someone to Nar Jahannam, that they will be punished in the hereafter with Nar. And also, some of Mufassirin, they ask this question, that the verse here says, Hur bil Hur, that the free person and the free person. So does this mean, how about if a free person kills a slave? Then is there a qisas? And there are different opinions here, but one of the interesting opinions I found in Imam Qurtubi, he says that bil qisas bayna ahrar wa abid fi nafs, that there should be equality between them. That just because a free person kills a slave, or if a person kills an occupied person, then there's still equality. وفي جميع الأعضاء واستدل داود بقوله عليه السلام المسلمون تتكافأ دماؤهم. That the believers is a hadith. The believers, that their blood is equal. So just because someone is from Arabia and someone's from Southeast Asia or someone's from Europe, it doesn't matter. Their blood has the same value. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after says that وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاءٌ. Subhanallah. And the ulama and balagha of rhetoric, they talk about this verse. When I studied balagha, there is a chapter where they talk about this paradoxical idea. We're talking about murder here, and we're talking about retribution, and we're talking about the fact that if someone kills another person, then they could be killed. But what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? In qisas, there's life. So we ask ourselves the question, how is there life in qisas? In this deep, troubling discussion of murder, how are we speaking about life? And the ulama, they quote the last part of this verse. Ya ulil albab la'allakum tattaqun. Oh people, you have thinking and knowledge and you're contemplating, have taqwa. Have this ability to restrain yourself from doing what's wrong. And there's this idea here that if someone engages in qisas and does it right, then murder will stop. Because they will realize that if I kill someone else, and then there's consequences, either I'm killed, or there's diya that my family has to pay money, then they will not commit the murder. And part of the mufassirin, they say here, فَكَمْ مِنْ رَجَلٍ subhanAllah. How many people in this world يُرِيد أَنْ يَقْتُلْ, that they want to kill someone? They see a group of people and they say, I wish I could kill that person. Or I wish I could kill all of them. I wish I could get rid of all of them because they're a nuisance. I want to cancel them. فَتَمْنَعْهُ الْمَخَافَةِ. But then what prevents them from doing that? That they begin to fear the consequence. مَخَافَةً أَنْ يُقْتَلْ. That they fear that they could be killed, or they would have to pay a certain diya or amount to it, and that they would be called out for that. This is very important in the world we live in today, that if there's a nation or there's a group of people, and they feel that, hey, look, there's that territory right there, and we can just go over there and kill those people or invade it and take it over, and no one will say anything, then they'll keep doing it. Until someone stands up and says, no, there's consequences for your actions. And that we as a community are not going to let that happen. So brothers and sisters in Islam, I want to conclude with the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah on this verse. So most of the mufassirin, they talk about this verse in relationship to individuals that are killed. But he makes a very fascinating opinion here that this was a group of two tribes that they came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they wanted to become Muslim. But they went to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, we want to become Muslim, but before in Jahiliyyah, we used to fight each other and kill one another. So what should we do? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse talking about the idea of diya. That, okay, there was some war, there was conflict. Now, compensate whoever died, whether it was the man, whether it was a slave, whether it was the woman, compensate them, and then come into Islam. And that's the whole idea of وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاءٌ. That instead of keep fighting and keep bloodshedding and so forth, come into this deen, emphasizing the idea of life. Because at the end of the day, this is one of the important qaida of Islam. That what is the purpose of all this? What is the purpose of our deen? The maqasid al-sharia. One of them is the preservation of life. And when we're in negotiations and we're talking to people and we're thinking about global conflicts, that's the end goal. What can preserve people's life? So to conclude, brothers and sisters in Islam, we see this verse has so many powerful values and principles that we have to implement as a community. First, the idea of equality. That we look at certain people, even in the masjid, we value certain people more than others. The brothers, the sisters, one people from this tribe, one people from this country. And we see this in global politics. One person dies here, no one says anything. No one cares. Someone dies in Gaza, what can we do? Right? Collateral damage. Another person dies, then everyone begins to scream and say, oh, this is impermissible. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says clearly here, al-hurr bil-hurr, right? That there is equality in qisas. That you don't kill one person and then raise the whole tribe or nation of another. Also, you see the important aspect of justice. That when this happens initially, when there is even one person's blood is shed, and people see that on the street, you have to immediately act. Because if the community, if the nation doesn't stand up strong, the imam, then people say, oh, this person died, this person was killed, I can keep going. No one's going to stop me. And I can kill maybe their family, their community, their neighborhood. So as a community, even when it's not even a crisis, it's important that we say something and we stand for what is truth. And lastly, brothers and sisters in Islam, let's reflect on this idea that fil qisas al-haya, Allahu Akbar. That in qisas, in this idea of retribution, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He introduced another category. That you don't always have to kill one another. You don't always have to create bloodshed. But there's this idea of diya, that you can give money, you can barter, you can apologize, you can ask for forgiveness. And then this is a takhfif. This is something that is a rahmah, that is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that, as believers, we should remember that. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. That between the believers especially, that we should do islah, that we should reconcile, and that we should act with one another in rahmah and in mercy. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.